Chapter 69. There wasn't even a gas station at the next exit, much less a repair shop, but there was a motel complete with stereotypical red neon sign and backroads. Diner attached. Catherine pulled into the overflowing parking lot. I guess people are getting in out of the rain, huh? It's packed. She found a space that wasn't meant for parking, but with the lot full, it would do. She turned off the ignition, struggling for her next move. Part of her wanted to drop him off and let him fend for himself. Part of her wanted to help. All of her didn't want to leave him. Ever. But what a fucking jerk he can be sometimes. I'd forgotten all about that. I'm going to get a room and clean up. Maybe by that time the weather will have let up and I can take care of the car. She blinked at the steering wheel. Okay. He was staring at her. She could feel it. You coming in? She touched her tongue to the roof of her mouth and deliberated. Just drop him off, Catherine. Keep going to Maine and have a good time. No good time will be had with this man. You know this. Don't do it. I don't bite, he said with an unexpected bit of flirtation. She glanced over to discover a slightly entertained gleam staring back at her. He looked ridiculously handsome with his clothes plastered to his body, his hair pushed up in a goofy way, all wet. The hair askew made him seem charming. But she knew better. I'm going to regret this. Sure. I'll just make sure you're okay. Off her tenseness, he lost his amusement. Don't worry. I won't touch you. Don't want to. He turned and was instantly enveloped in the torrential downpour. Catherine sighed and slipped on her sneakers as he grabbed his suitcase from the back and tossed her coat to her over the seat, shutting the back door with more effort and noise than was needed. She climbed out, doing her best to hold her coat up as a shield. The cement was flooded and her shoes were instantly drenched. She ran to catch up to him and he paused at the door of the pathetic motel office, holding it open for her. A surprise. Thank you, she mumbled, hurrying inside. He said nothing as he followed her to the plexiglass that stood between them and the board employee, a 20-something man with pasty skin and dead eyes. Behind him hung normal keys on rusty hooks. No modern credit card style keys. Here. These were probably the very same ones as when the place had opened in the mid-70s. The man of few words gave them a room and watched Dontae tuck his credit card back into his black leather wallet. How come you're wet? And she's not. She watched Dontae glance up as he signed his name. Rain can't touch an angel. As Catherine's jaw dropped, he laughed and added, and tonight it was too thick to see she ain't one. Steam exploded from her ears as she stared at the back of his big, stupid head. She reached over and swatted it. What the fuck? He turned, eyes on fire. I just saved your ass, so the least you could do is treat me with a little respect, you son of a bitch. She spun on her heels and headed for the door. See? Yeah. Catherine. He reached her in a flash, grabbed her arm and spun her around. With his fingers clamped onto her forearm, she glared at him, her coat dangling from her other hand. What? What, Dontae? Why stop me? You obviously hate me. His cheek twitched and he cracked his neck. Don't hit me again. I barely touched you. I don't care. Don't do it. Her jaw clenched on grinding teeth. Fine. He released her, glanced to the guy behind the gunproof glass watching the scene with interest. Come on, Dontae grumbled, reaching for his suitcase. The fact that he held the door again was a miracle, but that's just what he did. She hesitated. He cocked his chin as if to say, well, what are you waiting for? You never cease to amaze me, she snarled at him, walking cautiously past, like he might slam it on her if she wasn't careful. As soon as they were outside, he led the way with the self-confidence of someone who knew she would follow. Why am I staying here with you? Am I a glutton for punishment or what? Under the minimal shelter of an insufficient awning they made their way to room 7, millions of drops hitting them from the left. Without finesse he jammed the key in the lock and again held open the door for her. Since when are you a gentleman? I've always been a gentleman. Have you really forgotten that? She shrugged and walked inside, looking around the original decor of brown glass lamps, a single queen-size bed with a hideous quilt, and a tube TV on. A brown dresser shoved in the corner. She cast a look to him to see what he thought. He was clearly just as disgusted as she. He tossed the large suitcase on the bed as though it weighed nothing and unzipped it quickly, pulling off his sopping wet shirt like he was alone. Surprised, she turned around, but not before the sight of familiar muscles on his back, and the deep, strong line of his spine burned itself into her brain. She stared at the shiny orange and cream wallpaper, heart skipping despite herself. I'm in trouble. Get out of here. Leave now. There's a phone here. Want me to call a tow truck? A tow truck. In a minute, he said over the sound of wet jeans tugging down his legs. She shut her eyes and shuffled soggy feet. You want a new pair of socks? He asked her at the sound of sloshing. She waved over her shoulder. Huh. Oh no. I'm fine. She could feel him standing there naked. Her body knew it no matter how much she stayed glued to the horrid wall. Her cells had lit up with that old fire, and she needed her coat with both hands bobbing in place like a child. I'm going to take a shower. Okay. I'll be here, she squeaked. Footsteps. The bathroom door opened and shut. Released from suspense, she deeply exhaled and turned around. There he stood naked and hard in front of the closed door, having tricked her. She gasped, her hand fluttering up to her parted lips. His eyes were filled with the old lust she remembered so well, and they seemed lighter than they usually were. He strode swiftly to her and pulled her up by the backs of her thighs as he shoved her against the horrible wallpaper and enveloped her mouth with his own. It was the roughest, most passionate kiss of her life. He wouldn't look at her. She knew why. She'd betrayed him. How she wished she could take it back now. She closed her eyes and took his kisses when he gave them, knowing the best way to say she was sorry was to open her whole body to him to be taken as roughly as he wanted. He began to work her with circles, then hard plunging beats, then side thrusts, and more circles, faster then slower then faster. Again. His body dictated all of it. His mind was no longer in control. He pulled out, picked her up and threw her onto the bed, stunned that he could toss her like a rag doll, and for such a distance she bounced on her stomach and looked over her shoulder as he advanced on her. He grabbed her feet, flipped her around so they were facing each other, and entered her on his knees, bringing her ankles to rest on his collarbone. He could reach so much deeper in this position, and she could barely take his length, barely able to handle his hard length. She threw her hands over her head and grabbed the bed frame. He rammed her so hard the bed jammed against the wall over and over. People banged on the other side until he shouted with authority, "Shut the fuck up." Catherine laughed. A surprising grin flashed on Dontae's face, and there they were, smiling at each other like when they'd first met. But it was gone as soon as it had appeared. The anger returned in his eyes, and he rose up, lifting her with him. He was locked on her now, staring, telling her silently how much she'd hurt him. The pleasure and pain was too much for her. Her climax came unexpectedly and hard. It ripped her right down the center. She screamed out, and he sped up, taking advantage of her rapid pulses to bring him to the brink and over. He groaned and his head fell back, his thick neck exposed as he jerked out his intense pleasure. Dontae collapsed on top of her trembling body, panting as Catherine held him close. She kissed his neck, lacing her fingers into his damp hair. But without a word he got up and pulled out, leaping off the bed like she was contagious. He strode swiftly to the bathroom, slammed the door, and then had the audacity, on top of everything, to fucking lock it. On shaking elbows she rose up and stared at the door. The shower came on, muffled through the walls. She blinked at the sound, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Oh my God," she whispered, stunned and terribly hurt. Getting up, she slowly paced the room. Her shirt was broken, as were her bra and panties. Only her jeans were intact, so she put them on, went to his suitcase and pulled out one of his t-shirts, a black one she would no doubt swim in. Slipping it over her bedhead, she grabbed a pair of his dress socks and put them on too. She tugged on her sneakers. The shower turned off. She froze, then ran for the door, swooping down to grab her dropped coat and keys. "Where did I leave my purse?" "In the car?" Barreling out into the rain, she heard him behind her calling, "Catherine, come back." She sprinted as fast as she could for her parents' car. He caught up to her and lifted her off the flooded asphalt, his bare feet splashing. "Put me down. Dontae, put me down." Catherine, cut it out. "I can't take it. I know I hurt you, but I can't take it anymore." A family rushed to their SUV. Dontae glanced over and, suddenly aware of how this could look, set her down. "We're just having a fight. Don't worry," he called to the curious frowns. Catherine didn't give a flying fuck who was watching. The neon lights of the motel's sign splashed red onto his right side and highlighted every naked part of him. The wife was staring as the husband ordered her. Get in the car. Joyce. Kids, don't look. Marcy, I mean it. Look away. Catherine ignored them. How dare you leave me there lying on the bed? Wondering if you're coming back, or if you're going to keep punishing me in any way you can conceive of. I was just showering to clean myself off. I wasn't leaving you. Bullshit, she yelled, futilely blinking away the rain. You've been abusing me every chance you get. When are you going to forgive me, Dontae? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I did what I did. In pain he stared at her. You've never apologized. Well, she gasped, throwing up her arms. I'm apologizing now. I'm so sorry. I should never have done that to you. When are we going to talk about it? When? Are you going to forgive me? Sopping wet, rain all over and around them, they stared at each other as lightning lit up the sky. Thunder crashed into their hearts. Finally he quietly said, I can't. I just can't. Now come back inside. He held out an arm inviting her to walk with him, his body shining. But he wasn't hers and would never be again, so she cast her eyes downward. She gave a defeated nod and returned with him. If there were more witnesses to her broken heart, she didn't. Chapter 70. Clouded by a numbness he couldn't shake and with her apology echoing in his mind, Dontae pulled out a fresh shirt from his things and handed it to Catherine. I'd give you pants, but this is fine. She caught the fresh socks he tossed her way. Thanks. With their history an enormous barrier between them, they silently got dressed. She sat down on the only chair in the room to towel dry her hair, her distracted gaze locked on the dingy shag carpet, mind miles away. He hadn't meant to fuck her. He hadn't meant to invite her to the room at all. But he had. When she'd hit him on the back of the head, it hadn't hurt, of course, but it had impressed him. She stood up for herself. The way he saw it, she was the devil, a devil he couldn't resist. His wolf even now crashed about inside him, desiring release once more from its domesticated cage. But now that the flesh and blood woman was in front of him, not the version he'd been carrying in his grudge-filled mind for years, he was having a terrible time remaining unaffected by her vulnerability. Since that last night on the beach, the last time he'd seen her, he'd always pictured her a monster, and one who had no feelings for him, but now he couldn't deny she clearly had them. She looked stricken with pain and a desire to self-protect. But she cared about him and was just as tortured as he was. It wasn't an act. He knew human beings better than that. He'd seen enough evildoers to know she wasn't one of them. Then why? Why had she done what she'd done? He grabbed a belt and looped it through his slacks, eyeing her. What do you expect me to do, Catherine? Forget what you did, that you can't be faithful. She blinked from the floor to him, shaking her head slowly. You don't know me. He snorted. I know what I need to know. And besides that one very debilitating trait, I also know you pretty damn well. We did live together. Paid attention. She held his stare. But then something in the distance caught his attention, and he cocked his ears to the sound. He walked to the wall by the bed's headboard and listened. Behind him, Catherine asked, What is it, Dontae? He raised a hand for silence and closed his eyes to concentrate. His wolf took over and everything became audibly louder. There was someone watching reality TV in the next room by themselves. In the next, someone was eating pizza, complaining they'd burned their mouth, their friend laughing. And in the room after that, a woman begged for someone to stop. Stay here, Dontae commanded Catherine as he rushed to the door. Don't follow me. The rain hadn't let up. It hit his side as he strode quickly to the third door. Down, eyeing the ceiling for cameras. There were none. Was that on purpose or a product of another age? He listened at the door to make sure what he heard wasn't some kinky, consensual sex play. It wasn't. He stepped back, looked left and right for anyone watching. No one was around. He closed his eyes and listened for heartbeats in nearby cars. The lot was empty of human beings. He focused on the door and took a single step back. Cracking his neck, his eyes began to glow, and with all his supernatural strength he shot out a powerful kick. The door split in two, splintering at the hinges. A disgusting sight waited for him inside. The dead-eyed employee of the motel had a woman of at least 60 against the wall. At the explosion they both looked toward the door. Her eyes were wide with terror and shock, his narrowed in irritation at the interruption. Her suitcase lay on its side on the ground. Like she tried to throw it at him, the contents splayed on shag carpet. The attacker had a bite mark in his arm, but now was pinning hers. Her polyester pants were down around only one ankle, and as she crossed and recrossed her legs to evade him, he wrestled with her white cotton panties. His belt was undone, pants still up. Dontae raced with enhanced speed and knocked the rapist against the opposite wall. He fell with a horrible thud and a grunt, swearing at the wolf. The woman began to sob, modestly covering her panties with her both hands. With evil emanating from beady, angry eyes, the rapist started to get up. Who the fuck do you think you are? You're undoing. Dontae kicked him in the face so hard the man's head swung back in an ugly way and he fell in a heap, consciousness lost. Pausing, Dontae listened for a heartbeat. It was still there. Pity, he muttered. But he and his pack tried not to kill whenever possible. It only fed the wolf to do so. And besides that, they needed less attention drawn to them. It didn't always work out that way, as Nathaniel knew well. Dontae turned to the crying woman. It's okay now. I'm a friend. He won't hurt you anymore. Oh my God. Oh my God. She kept repeating, tears streaming. With great caution, his hands up for her to see, he walked to the bed and pulled the top blanket off, holding it up so she could fix herself in private. He looked away. She sniffled and very quietly thanked him. Did you use that suitcase as a weapon? He asked, looking at it. I tried to, she choked, sliding up her pants and buttoning them with trembling fingers. Okay, I'm dressed. He lowered the blanket. She looked like anybody's mother, or perhaps a grandmother of toddlers. Only tragic with the streaked mascara. That was a brave thing to do. Smart also. It didn't do a lot of good, she mumbled. And you got a pretty good chunk out of him too. Dontae jerked his chin toward the unconscious male's bite mark. You want to hit him? Kick him? Promise I won't tell. She stared from Dontae to her would-be rapist, and a small smile tugged at her tear-stained cheeks. No thank you. Okay. Then it's time to call the police, but can you do me a favor? She was still staring at her assailant. Maybe I'll hit him just once. Dontae held out an inviting arm. She walked over, hands clasping and unclasping. He watched her stare down at the man who had been about to haunt the rest of her future with a memory no woman should ever have to endure. She stepped back, primed her leg and kicked the man in the balls with everything she had. His body tilted over more and Dontae listened for the heartbeat. Still there, but it had jumped when the blow landed. Dontae smirked and nodded to her with approval as she looked toward him, eyebrows drawn together. What's your name? Linda Baker. Linda. I'm sorry this happened to you today, and I'm sorry I took as long as I did to get here. But will you forgive that and do me a favor? Anything. Call the police after I'm gone. You can tell them I saved you, but when they ask for a description, please be vague. Change my eye color. Switch anything you want to, the more the better. Will you do that for me? The question in her eyes was squelched immediately by a desire to show her gratitude. Yes. I'm guessing you won't tell me your name then. Better not. He smiled and bowed to her. Appropriate distance from men for the time being was what she needed. Experience had shown him that, so he would not even try to shake her hand goodbye. He and his packmates helped victims as a hobby, making their abusers pay in myriad ways. They did this to make use of their enhanced abilities, serve the city they love and make their wolves feel useful, now that they were no longer running wild in the forests of their youth. Before Dontae left the room, he glanced to the fallen man, then back to Linda. He won't be awake for a while, but I'd call the police from somewhere else. Just in case. He works here. They'll be able to track him down easily if he wakes up before that. You make sure you're safe. She went for her suitcase. Thank you. Yes, I'll call from my car. Thank you so much. With the rain at his right, Dontae headed back to his room wondering how he'd explain his disappearing act to his ex. This is the problem with spending time with human females. They ask questions I can't answer. He opened the door and looked around. Catherine. One brief moment of listening and he knew she wasn't there. He didn't have to check the bathroom even with the door closed as it was. Her heartbeat was gone. The sound of her breath as it entered her lungs, gone. The scent of her was now a mere memory on the dusty room air. He walked in circles, head in his hands, stunned. She left. He told her he couldn't forgive her, so she left. He threw back his head and roared, the tortured sound ricocheting. Panting, he grabbed a wall to brace himself. His wolf was furious and wanted him to shift. He was at war. But then he heard someone behind him in the doorway, and he spun around to see Linda standing there with her suitcase in one hand, her light blue coat in the other, keys jingling as she nervously fiddled. She asked quietly, "Are you okay?" The rain pattering loudly behind her. With all the self-discipline he could barely muster, he struggled against his wolf and cracked his neck as he gave a very curt nod and grated through gritted teeth. "My friend seems to have left. You need a ride somewhere?" Dontae blinked to the ground and then back to her. He grimaced and commanded his wolf to calm the fuck down. Gasping for air, he said, "Excuse me a moment. Please don't leave." He walked to the bathroom and shut the door, splashing water on his face. The cold baptism he coupled with direct and soothing, silent mantras. "I've got this. I can do this. Control. Control yourself. Let her go. She had to leave. Let her go. You are stronger than this." Afraid he'd lose his ride out of here, he quickly dried his face with a white, inexpensive hand towel, tossed it, and rushed back out. "Yes, I'd appreciate that, Linda. Thank you." He reached for his suitcase, hands shaking as he stuffed all the odds and ends back in. "Can you take me to the next city up? It doesn't matter where. Just as long as it's bigger than this and isn't here." "Sure." He zipped the blasted thing up and grabbed the handle, heading for the door. She started to move out of the way, but he swooped down and took her heavy suitcase. "Let me get that for you." She led the way to a 2009 white Toyota Tercel, hitting the unlock button on her keybob so that all the doors opened at once. Dontae futilely scanned for Catherine's Mercedes, then put the suitcases in back. It was a good thing the storm hadn't let up. There was no one outside, no witnesses to tell the story of his rescue and escape with the victim. As he climbed in, he said, "Call the police now. I'll stay quiet." She nodded, pulled out her phone and put it on her lap to turn on the ignition. The car came to life, a Lionel Richie song on the radio. As they pulled out of the parking lot, he listened to her tell emergency dispatch. She'd just been attacked. She reenacted the story and explained she was leaving because she was terrified. As she deftly steered the car with her knee, Linda reached into her purse and tossed him a Snickers, never missing a beat in her story. Life would never cease to amaze him. Chapter 71. At the next city, Dontae climbed out at Bob's Garage, an old mechanic's shop, dimly lit from the inside. It was late, so the ancient place was, of course, closed. Linda objected to leaving him there, but the truth was that for the entire 10 miles after she'd finished with the police, she hadn't stopped talking. She was nice, but he wasn't in the mood. Plus Catherine had disappeared and he couldn't stop thinking about her. It was driving him fucking crazy. "I'll be right back. Maybe they have a car I can. Anyway, I'll be right back." Linda reached under her seat. "Oh, I've got an umbrella." He stared at the pink and yellow thing a moment, then stifled a long exhale. "Take it. It's too wet out there." He wanted to argue very badly, but she was helping him, so he thought it best not be ruder than he naturally was. "Fine." Shielded by the feminine contraption, Dontae sloshed up the driveway and looked into the window. A large-bellied, balding man in his mid-40s lay on his back under a propped-up BMW, a wrench in one grease-covered hand and a flashlight in the other. The single bulb above the car afforded little extra help. Dontae rapped on the dirty window. The mechanic craned his neck to see if the sound was a figment of his imagination. His shaggy brow furrowed and he wiped it with the back of his hand. An oil streak joined the existing many. "Who's there?" he hollered. "Sir, my car broke down on 95. Dontae waited for the expected New Yorker reply, "Fuck off, we're closed," but instead the man laid down both tool and light and scooted out more gracefully than his size would indicate he could. Years of practice improves performance in all things. The paint chip door opened. The man had a rag in his hands now, wiping away. Only the rag didn't have a clean spot on it, so the effort was pretty useless. He eyeballed Dontae's umbrella, making the werewolf smile. "It's hers." Dontae explained, pointing to Linda in her Toyota. She was kind enough to drive me here. Where'd you break down? Busted tire. Oh, Dontae asked with raised eyebrows. Is that common? The man jogged his head, double chin bouncing. Yep. Happens at least 4-5 times every 2 weeks. Well, I busted, as you say, 2 of them, and I ran over a long metal piece. I believe is called a fender. My engine made a noise no car should make. The man gave a long, low whistle and stared at the possibilities. That's not good, I gathered. Do you have a car I can buy until mine is fixed? Eyebrows nearly flew right off the man's dirty forehead. Buy a car? Not rent. Now would have been the time for dollar signs to shine in those brown eyes, but they didn't. He looked only surprised, not greedy. I've got 2 you could choose from. People sometimes can't pay for the job and so they sell me the car for a lower rate after I've done the work. Gives me a chance to get money back with a profit. Smart. Come on in. The man turned around, but Dontae stopped him. Let me just tell the nice lady she can go now. The man shrugged and continued inside. Back at the car, Dontae climbed in. I'm all taken care of, Linda. Thank you. I can stay and make sure. I'll be fine. I promise. He closed the borrowed parasol of sorts and slipped it onto the floor. Stay dry, he smiled, but something in her eyes had changed. Everything okay? She cast him a sideways look. The police called while you were out there. They want me to go back and file a report. Then go file it. Whatever needs to be done to put that man away, do it. She stared out the windshield. It's so embarrassing. I don't want to. Listen to me, Linda. She looked at him, his tone arresting her. These kinds of cases were always the hardest. Women didn't want to make a fuss. Better to just forget it ever happened. You have nothing to be ashamed about. Victims of these types of crimes always feel shame, but that's wrong. You know why? She shook her head, doubtful but listening. Because they're not the ones who should be ashamed. Predators did the crime. They should feel the shame, and only them. You were attacked. You didn't attack someone. It wasn't you who did this, therefore you cannot blame yourself. It's on him. Only on him. He's gross and unworthy and a foul human being. You are just a woman who fought back. Do you understand? She nodded, tears in her eyes. And Linda, you have to file that report, because if you don't and you ignore this, which I can completely understand why you'd want to, another woman will suffer. This was not his first rape attempt. He's probably been successful before, from the look in his eyes when I interrupted. He wasn't surprised, only angry. That's not an innocent man. And it will not be his last. File the report for her. For the woman who needs you to save her. Linda reached over to touch his hand. Thank you for what you did. I will go file it. Her fingers were so feminine and fragile, the skin very soft. She watched him get out and remove his suitcase from the back seat, nodding. Goodbye. With the rain threatening to drench him all over again, Dontae strode quickly to the waiting open door, eyes locked on the repair shop. He heard the Toyota drive off. He didn't look back. Chapter 72. Crushed, Catherine had taken off to save what little remained of her sanity. As her parents' Mercedes fought the storm, visions kept replaying of the fucking bastard standing naked in the pouring rain, telling her he couldn't forgive her, mingled with those of his punishing kisses and angry, urgent thrusts. Damn it! She yelled at the windshield. The outside darkness only exacerbated her feeling of loss, and the torrential downpour wasn't helping either. I'll get over it, she whispered. I can do this. I don't need him. I don't want him. I really don't. 10 miles north from the old motel, she pulled off the freeway, used the dark parking lot of a closed mechanics shop, Bob's garage, to turn around in, and sped on the 95 in the other direction. She kicked herself for being such a masochist all the way back. As she pulled up, her heart stopped at what she saw. There were 3 empty cop cars sprawled throughout the parking lot with their emergency lights ominously swirling. What the hell happened in the last 20-25 minutes? She whispered, inching her car into an empty spot. The room they'd been in, number 7, looked dark, but a door a few rooms over was hanging off the hinges, split down the middle. What the hell did that? 2 policemen stood nearby. She watched as 4 other policemen walked out. The man who checked them into the hotel, his hands cuffed behind his back. He had blood running down his face. lot in his ear, and he was furious. The police weren't handling him gently. She waited until they left before she got out and knocked on room 7. No answer. Dontae? It's me. She knocked again. On a whim she tried the doorknob and pulled her hand back. Quickly as it gave way. When he didn't come barreling at her, she peeked. Inside. The room was empty, his suitcase gone. Oh no. What have I done? She stared at the emptiness. The diner. Running for it, she yanked the door open so hard the welcoming bell nearly had a heart attack. There were less people hiding from the storm than before, but the place was still crazy busy. The waitress looked like this was the worst night of her life. Catherine walked through a cacophony of clanging silverware and loud conversation, searching the faces. The counter had the usual, mostly solo drivers, but he wasn't among them either. Dontae, where did you go? Out of options, Catherine approached the short-haired 30-something waitress. 2 ketchup bottles, a notepad, pencil, and a slew of paper-wrapped straws protruded from her apron. Excuse me, I'm Melanie, she said, reading the name tag. Has a handsome blonde man in an expensive suit come in here just now? Within the last half hour. The waitress looked at her like she was an alien. How should I know? This was supposed to be a slow night, so I was the only one on the schedule. Look at this shit. She waved an exhausted hand around the room and headed away. Catherine followed her. You'd notice him. Hazel eyes. Oh, he had a suitcase. Not everyone has those. The waitress picked up 2 empty plates with balled-up napkins on them and told the customers, I'll get your pie in a sec. She walked past Catherine, exasperated at being followed. I don't remember anyone like that. Well, what about the cops? Do you know why they were here? The waitress rolled her eyes. How the hell should I know? Thwarting more questions, she headed inside the kitchen. Catherine almost followed her in. But a balding man in a nice coat leaned over from the counter. A woman was almost raped, he said with a look of conspiracy in his eyes. She turned to him aghast. I saw them take away the guy who works in the office. He did it. Or tried to. Apparently some man saved her. He came in and beat the crap out of the guy. Catherine stared at him. How do you know this? My wife's never been afraid of butting in, so she asked the police. It's a small town, he shrugged. Even the police love a good story because, well, little happens out here. A man saved her? Who? Catherine's mind swam back to when Dontae mysteriously listened at the wall and vanished. She thought he was, well, she hadn't known what the hell he was doing, but she definitely had no idea it might be this. They don't know. She said she didn't see much because she was covering her eyes in shock, you know. Right. God, I can imagine. She said he had a high voice. Catherine frowned. Oh, well, that makes no sense. Or it just can't be. Dontae. Yeah, the guy with the high voice beat the crap out of him. The man's 50-year-old wife in a nice sweater and slacks returned and, hearing the story recounted, jumped right in with a gleam in her brown eyes. Yeah, isn't it wild? Some motel guests walked by the room to go get ice, saw the broken door and him lying there unconscious and all bloody. They called the police. Catherine blinked several times, horrified that this had happened so close, and after she'd seen the man give Dontae the room key, it made her shudder. How do you know she was almost raped? She's okay. Oh yeah, the wife enthusiastically chimed in. The police told me that when she called, she told them that he hadn't, that the man had gotten there just in time. And when the other motel guests, the ones who went for the ice, went to see if he was okay, he started rambling in his sleep. Her husband quickly added with a knowing look, bet he wishes he'd kept his mouth shut. Pretty damning stuff, he said. Nausea waved through Catherine's stomach. Okay, I think I've heard enough. It's awful. Disappointed she wasn't as excited by the drama as they were, both wished her the polite, have a good night. That's not possible. Outside the diner she paced aimlessly. The rain seemed never to want to end. It was late, she was tired, and the road was treacherous. She ran to her car and rolled her suitcase quickly over to room 7. Laying it on the chair she'd towel-dried her hair on, she walked to lock the door. Well, it's paid for. And I'm guessing the sicko who runs the place won't be coming back tonight. Turning to look at the empty room, she shook her head. Spirit defeated. Why'd I have to run? Chapter 73. Dontae asked. So are you Bob? Taking a look around the unorganized shelves of parts, tools, old rags, and new tires. That's right. He cocked an unkempt eyebrow. You want to buy a shop? Dontae smiled and said with uncharacteristic politeness, No, thank you. I'm just kidding. Bob cracked up with a series of low, wheezy smokers. Chortles. I'd never give this place up, but I like to tease my wife that I hate it. He walked to the back door, dirtier than the front one, adding over his shoulder, Would I be here this late if I hated it? Nah. He waved his hand toward the floor as he gave the door a sharp kick. This knob's busted. Gotta give it a little help. Not too hard though. Dontae followed him out to where a very long roof had been erected to shield an open driveway out back. The pellets of water were having a field day with the tin acoustics. Beneath there were cars in various stages of repair, plus a few off to the side that looked finished. One was a 1970 Ford Mustang, the other a 1974 Jensen straight out of a James Bond film, and the last a Honda Accord circa 1992. The Jensen is mine. Ain't she pretty? Dontae nodded. She's gorgeous. Running an admiring hand down the sleek eggshell white hood. Yeah, but like most gorgeous things, she costs. Pride glowed from Bob's crinkly eyes as he whistled. I put more money into that baby than I like to admit. I love her though. How about this one? I knew you wouldn't go for the Honda. That Mustang is a money gobbler, no doubt. He glanced to Dontae, noticing the werewolf's surprise. I like to tell it like it is. Keeps my conscience clear. Rare trait. Bob shrugged. Helps me sleep at night. Anyway, you don't have to worry about nothing for a while though, because I put a new engine in her and she's got new hoses, brakes, hell. Even her tires have great tread. She'll get you back home. Until your car is fixed. I'm not going home. Well, to my old home. Dontae trailed off, bending at the waist to look inside. Midnight blue with matching interior. Bench seats like he'd seen in movies. There were even red fuzzy dice hanging from the mirror. I'll take it. I didn't tell you how much. Bob chortled, wheezing again. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it. Dontae straightened up, the rain a backdrop. How much? Bob's eyes twinkled as he thought about it, taking a big puff of his cig. Tell you what, you can borrow it for a few days and give me the job of fixing. What do you have? An Audi A4 sedan. Weehoo. That's gonna be fun. Dontae chuckled and glanced to the car. Well, Bob, that's a generous offer. But I was going to have you do the job anyway. How about I buy the car and when you fix my Audi, I'll sell it back to you minus a couple $1,000. Bob made a noise and said, Deal. They shook on it and Dontae smirked. I might fall in love with her. If I do, you're out of luck. Bob chortled, took another deep puff with his forehead all scrunched. If you're driving as nice a car as the one you've got, you might fall in love with her like a man loves a whore, but you'll put her back when you're finished with her, just like one too. He stomped on the cig and walked back inside to get the paperwork. Can't have fire near the gasoline, he explained. Wolves are nocturnal by nature. Even with the night's dramatic events, he felt awake. As soon as he paid the mechanic, gave him the keys to his Audi, and told him where it could be found, Dontae bid the man good night, eager to drive his new horse far, far away from there. He liked the feel of the old car. Could get used to this driving thing. He followed the freeway heading to his childhood home and tried to find comfort in picturing the faces of his old pack. He loved them dearly and they him, but there was no comfort to be had now. He had an itch inside him that bugged the shit out of his determined, stubborn spirit. For 2 hours he struggled to ignore it. Finally he found himself following signs that led in another direction altogether, and then there he was, checking into a bed and breakfast on the coast of Maine, nearest the lobster fishermen and the places who bought and sold their daily catch. Do you know how long you're going to stay? The widower asked, swiping the wolf's credit card. Just the one night, Dontae answered, his mind on her. I just need one night to do what I have to do. The widower's white eyebrows knit together, pushing up pale skin under a shock of wintry hair. You sound like you're on a mission. Dontae nodded to himself and slid the card back in his wallet. You could put like that. I have to get closure around an issue that's been haunting me for a long time. Something happened here, did it? The old man's green long-sleeved sweater stretched as he leaned on the desk with both hands. We've got a mysterious town, I'll tell you that. How so? Well, ghosts, you know. Actual ones, but also the kind that rise up from decisions people made, ones they wish they could take back. This is a place of romance, and with romance, sad to say, often comes pain. Dontae stared at the man. Well, it's my first time here, but I can't argue with you. I'm sure that's in the cards. He turned for his suitcase. It's been a long night. I'm going to get some sleep. Then he remembered he didn't have his phone, which meant no alarm. Lifting his suitcase by the handle, he turned back to the widower. Can you call my room in a couple hours? What time is it? My car doesn't have a clock. Oh. The man pulled an iPhone from his pocket, surprising Dontae very much. Everything about this place said old-fashioned, especially its owner. 15 after 7 in the a.m. When do you want to wake up? When do most people eat lobster? All day long around here. Dontae chuckled. Okay, well, how about the tourists? The man pursed his lips. 1 o'clock? Unless you're talking about dinner. Then it would be more like 1 is fine. She's not the type to wait. Can you wake me at 12:30? Sure. I'll give your door a good knocking. No phones in the rooms. We've only got 4 of 'em, so people just walk down and ask when they need something. And you can grab extra towels if you need 'em from the closet in the hall. Help yourself. Dontae smiled and headed for the stairs. See you then. Sweet dreams, Mr. Shepherd. Realizing his rudeness, he turned. I'm sorry. What's your name? Thomas. Thomas Willoughby. He saluted lightly. Thanks, Mr. Willoughby. Nice place you got here. He found his room with no problem at all. Green walls, leaded glass windows, antique furniture and rugs. The inviting 4-poster bed had him in its clutches within minutes, his wolf loving the fact that they were sleeping in the daytime for the first time in weeks. He and his pack of 4 kept normal hours most days of the week, but left a couple open for late sleeping to appease the beast they each shared soul space with. But with the new job they'd booked recently, it was a daily grind of court clearances and foundation-laying details that could not be put off. As he closed his eyes, his mind slipped back to the firm. He wondered how Nathaniel, Eli and Dark were handling everything without him. Probably fucking it all up, no doubt. Well, let them find their way. I can't hold their hands every time. A little after noon, a knock on the door woke Dontae. He rolled over and called out, Thomas. Yes, Mr. Shepherd, came the muffled reply. It's that time. Thank you. He blinked away his grogginess and lay staring at the door as the widower's footsteps got quieter and finally disappeared downstairs. From the lack of human sound on the second floor, the other 3 rooms were unoccupied, but that might just be because of the time of day. Didn't matter. Still, he couldn't help but listen for a few moments for the hell of the quilt pulled to accommodate his long stretch. Why am I sore? He remembered how tense he'd been waiting for help in the rain, and then having his ex the surprising answer to his prayers. He'd been knotted up the entire time, and the ride in the old Mustang wasn't exactly smooth. Not that he was complaining about the car. He loved the thing already. Coffee, he muttered, climbing out of bed, dick swinging as he walked to the ensuite bathroom. As he took care of business, he eyed himself in the mirror. He sniffed the air and realized his body still smelled of her. She was in his pores, their sex sweat mingled. On a low, irritated growl, he said, So, today's the day you say goodbye forever. I gotta tell ya, I thought this day had already come and gone. He went for the shower and ran his hand under the water to wait for the hot water to come. Flashes of Catherine wrapped around his torso danced before him. Like teasing fragments of desire he could never again allow himself to indulge in. Suddenly he didn't want to wash her off him, but he was barely conscious of this. Turning off the stream, he opted for the sink and splashed his face instead. I don't have time, he lied. I'll shower later. Dressed in a navy blue trench, charcoal gray slacks, and a white sweater, he took the stairs 2 at a time. Mr. Willoughby stood vigil at the small antique reception desk, and he turned his head as Dontae appeared. Good luck, Mr. Shepherd. Thank you. He turned to the stained glass door, looking through the clear slices. The storm is over? It is. Good. Okay then. I'll be back in an hour. You know where you're going? I drove by the main cafes last night. I'll find what I'm looking for there. Outside, the ground was still wet in the shadows, partly dry on the sunny parts of cement and sidewalk. The air was crisp and felt good for his rapid stroll to the waterfront. 2 hours later, he came back for his car and searched further. She was nowhere to be found. This he had not expected. What the hell did I think? She'd just be sitting in some little hole in the wall sucking on a lobster tail? Angrily he headed back to the bed and breakfast at just after 6 o'clock to devise a new plan. Chapter 74. Oh, I love your sitting room, Catherine smiled. Is this the original wallpaper? The kind old man beamed, reaching over to touch the faded colors nearest him. Yes, indeedy. I make sure the cleaning lady uses only damp towels for her. Just a little dusting is all she needs. He received a big smile from the newest arrival, because Catherine had slept more soundly than expected. She'd embarked on her journey a little after 10 that morning, stopping for a good lunch along the way. Now it was 5:45 p.m., and all she wanted to do was relax a bit and then go find that tasty crustacean she'd been dreaming about. Well, it's just perfect. I saw the sign and couldn't believe it. You have no idea, sir, but this place is exactly what I need. So charming. How long are you staying, Ms. Zenith? And I think I'll stay a few days. Is that okay? I didn't make a reservation. Do you have a room available for that long? He made a sweet noise and waved his hand. This close to winter means we have room. I only have one other guest at the moment and he's leaving tonight. Well, it's my lucky day. Catherine smiled as she handed him her credit card and took the extended key. Are the rooms numbered? They are. He swiped the charge. You'll be in number 3. It's just up the stairs. Sign here. Oh, he read her card. Catherine. That's a pretty name. My wife's name was Eleanor. That's a pretty name too. Catherine smiled. He had a very soothing way about him, and she continued to feel more and more like she was about to get all the rest she sorely needed. With nostalgia in his eyes, he said, She and I bought this place in the 50s. Turned it into a B&B after the kids went away to college. She loved making pancakes for strangers. My wife was the best hostess in all of Maine. No lie. Admiring the love, she respectfully asked, When did you lose her? He handed her back her card. 8 very long years ago. But she's with me. Still. I hear her on the steps sometimes. She's waiting for me to join her. Just know it. Catherine smiled, her heart aching a little. I'm sure she is. You want me to carry your suitcase? He looked to be around 75 and, while he wasn't bent over with age, he certainly didn't look stronger than she. I've got it, thank you. Nonsense. He came out from behind the desk and wrapped wrinkled, spotted hands around the rolling bar, shoving it down like a man who's done it zillions of times, lifting the case with more ease than she gave him credit for. He threw her a huge grin. I'm Thomas Willoughby. You need anything, just ask. And there are towels and extra blankets in the hall closet. Help yourself. Like this was your own home. You're so sweet, Thomas, thank you. She followed him up the stairs. Oh, is this your wife? There were 20 or so framed black and white photographs adorning the stair walls of many sizes and frame styles. He glanced to the one she was pointing at. That's her, right after she told me Edward was coming. Our son. Look how happy she was. We've been trying for a year and finally eureka. Catherine laughed and followed him up to room 3. He tucked her suitcase just inside the door. Here you are. Thank you, Thomas. He tipped his chin and headed off. She closed the door and looked around the room. It was extremely lovable, with its baby blue walls, cream-colored rug with birds strewn into the intricate design, leaded glass windows, and antique furniture save for one lamp that was modern but of the same style. It must have replaced a broken one in a recent year. Not one to enjoy living out of suitcases, she hummed and unpacked her clothes. Into the empty antique dresser. There was a small round mirror above it and she caught her reflection, noting a warm, happy light in her eyes. Until she heard him. Why do I smell you? She dropped the neatly folded stack of sweaters on the floor. Oh shit, she muttered, turning around in total shock. Oh shit is right. He grumbled, knocking hard on her door. How did he hear me? Mortified, she walked over and slowly opened it. What are you doing here? Looking for you. She blinked. You can't have followed me. It's not possible. Then raked a quick glance down his body. Hot damn, a sweater and a trench coat. I mean, no. Get away. Glowering, he pushed inside and closed the door behind him, his eyes anywhere but on her. I didn't follow you. I got here this morning and you've just arrived, so don't get any ideas that I did. I was here first and he trailed off, buttoning and unbuttoning his coat. She watched him fidget. It was very odd to see him looking so unsure of what to say or do. Then how are you here? Is this where you were headed to? Is this just a coincidence? I'm very confused, Dontae. She backed up and leaned against the dresser, quickly glancing down at the dropped sweaters. She picked them up, demanding, well, don't go all speechless on me. Hazel eyes rose quickly and he raked a hand through his blonde locks, frowning deeply. You said lobster. You said Maine. So here I am. They stared at each other for a very long time until she whispered, you came here to have lobster with me. As if, he snorted. Don't get any ideas. I came here for closure. Everything all right, Miss Zenith? Called Mr. Willoughby through the door. Catherine walked over quickly, darting a confused look to her ex as he paced in anxious circles. Opening the door, she forced a polite smile. Yes, I'm fine. It seems your other guest is my ex-boyfriend. We're about to have a fight. Don't be alarmed. It won't get physical. He's not that stupid. Catherine, Dontae muttered. She threw him an impatient glance. I just want to make sure he knows that if he hears yelling, it's okay. The experienced old man threw up his hands. Enough said. I'll leave you to it. He began to head away but then turned. Did you know he would be here? She had no idea, Dontae called out. And I didn't know she'd be rooming here either. The devil has a sense of humor. Thomas Willoughby headed for the stairs, muttering, that he does. Catherine shut the door on a smirk. I thought I was the devil. You are. Rebelliously she crossed her arms. Oh really? I'm the devil. And why is that? You know why. Because I left you for another man? What did you expect me to do? You never really let me in, Dontae. Do you know what it's like to love a man whose heart is hidden behind a cement wall? Do you have any idea how many ways I tried to break that wall down and get you to open up to me? But you never did. For all those years we were together, I gave you everything. You gave me only what you wanted to. He looked stunned, the anger hovering as he grated. I loved you. No, you didn't. That's not love. Love isn't holding a piece of you away from someone. Love isn't holding someone at arm's length and keeping them on the edge wondering where they stand. Love isn't lying about saying you'll meet a woman's family just so she'll shut up. Grinding his teeth, he turned away. I meant to meet them. I would have at some point. And what difference does it make? You were unfaithful. Unfaithful to what? Half a man? Half a heart? It was a cry for help. I wanted you so badly, but you were never totally there with me. I needed more than that. More than you gave me. I needed more than what you were offering in order to be happy. I shouldn't have done it that way. I know. I have wished again and again that I could go back in time, but I can't. I'm human, Dontae. I made the worst mistake of my life handling our breakup by running to him the way that I did. I should have ended things with you first. I know that. And I'm sorry. He whipped around so fast she gasped. His eyes looked lighter. Suddenly he seemed ferocious. She stepped back as he advanced on her, his voice low and menacing. And did you get more? Did he give you what you wanted? Her right hand subconsciously went to touch her finger that until 2 nights ago displayed an engagement ring. Yes. She paused, her heart breaking at the memory. She spoke fast, scared of the look on his face. And no, I broke off our engagement. That's why I'm here. To get away. He's packing up his things. She choked. Stop looking at me like that. You're scaring me. The air seemed to shift. Dontae stared at her like he was looking at a perplexing stranger who just told him the sun was flat. With intense disbelief he demanded, the same man? You've been with the same man this whole time? Her chin lifted. Yes. Dontae walked to sit on the bed, elbows on his thighs, staring into the distance. You were engaged to this man? Well, what did you think I was doing? Fucking all of Manhattan. Off his quick glance she exploded. Oh great. Just great. That's what you've been thinking. Shaking her head in disgust, she paced and glared at him. But his eyes were cast away from her. After a long pause he muttered. Are you saying it's my fault? It seemed to be the first time this idea had ever occurred to him. He looked over to her, pain and shock behind his searching gaze. She stopped walking, her lips parting to answer. But he shot off the bed. walked past her and out of the room before she had the chance. Gaping at his unexpected exit, she stood frozen. Then she charged after him into his room, slamming the door behind her. He spun around. How dare you leave me in the middle of this fight, Dontae Shepherd? I have never known a more selfish, egotistical bastard as you in my entire life. And the worst part is I'm still in love with you. Can you believe what an idiot I am? She held her head in her hands. I'm so stupid. Suddenly he was on her, grabbing her face hard with both hands and crushing her lips with a deep kiss. She gasped for air, shocked, but he wouldn't let up, kissing her until he moved down her neck. Stop, she begged, pushing him away. Please stop. He leapt backward as though bitten by a snake. Struggling for air, he stared at the floor, gripping a wall. I didn't know I was doing that until I was. I'm sorry. The room disappeared in time with it as his eyes were locked with hers. Catherine. Fuck. I can't believe this. He quieted again, panting. You're right. I was keeping a secret. I have a secret. And it's bigger than you can imagine. He saw her expression. No. And not a wife or a secret child. Nothing like that. Then what? What was it? For God's sake, please tell me. I have to know. He pulled off his trench coat and whispered. Whatever you do, don't scream. Her eyes went wide. What? I mean it. He'll come running. Dontae pointed to the first floor. Are you serious? You are serious. Very. He stripped naked. She backed up. Are you going to try something, because right now I'm not in the mood? Turning toward her, his voice was so low she could barely hear him. I won't hurt you. Know that. Without pause, he shifted into a white-haired wolf right before her very eyes. Chapter 75. When he'd returned to the bed and breakfast, his nostrils had flared, instantly picking up her scent. With just a nod to the widower, he'd barreled up the stairs, following the intoxicating trail. His wolf thrashed about just under the surface, and he'd mistaken that reaction for rage. Now he knew it was much more. He made the transition as quiet as possible and soon stood on 4 paws. Catherine backed against the wall, hand fluttering to shocked, parted lips. Her eyes raced over all of him and she breathed. Oh my God. You're a. He had never shown his wolf to a human he hadn't meant to terrorize. He'd been waiting until this moment. His brethren knew this. His heart ached with longing for her to understand and accept him, but he felt suddenly he should have warned her. That hadn't been an option. The idea had come to him to do this with such fierce passion and need that he hadn't given it a second of thought. He laid his white muzzle between his front paws, his chin on the antique rug. This seemed to calm her. Her heart rate stopped speeding up to a dangerous pace. With her back against the far wall, she whispered, Dontae. He lifted his head. Can you understand me? He nodded. Oh my God, you're in there? He nodded again. Her hand hovered between them as she took a few tentative steps toward him. He saw it shaking, so to soothe her, he lowered his muzzle again. Just like a dog when it's being cute. She knelt down. Is that really you in there? He blinked and bounced his head a little. Your eyes. They're glowing. And they're gorgeous. Green and gold. Can I touch you? He scooted closer to her and bowed his head. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to tremble. I'm trying so hard. Finally she ran 3 fingers up the slope of his nose until she touched his left ear, stroking the fur. You're so breathtakingly beautiful. Can't believe this is what you've been hiding. How lonely you must have been. His chest ached at the words and he shifted back to his human form, kneeling on the floor with her. He wanted to pull her to him, but he didn't dare after she'd begged him to stop kissing her. He needed her to trust him now that he'd trusted her. She reached out and touched his face. Why did you just show me that? I think I know, but I need to hear it from you. Can I touch you? She laughed. Of course you can. Relieved, he sat on the rug and pulled her into his arms. Is this okay? She nodded, but her eyes were still dumbstruck. My packmates have come out of the supernatural closet, so to speak. They paved the way. Packmates? You mean? Yes. Dark, Nathaniel, Eli. They are. He could see she was searching the memories her mind opened to who his friends, once so familiar to her, really were. I can't believe it. And I have to admit, I'm jealous I was never part of the secret, you guys. Always knew something I didn't. He frowned. Understandable. Dontae, she said on a whisper. Why did you just show me? Maybe you're right. Maybe I do have a wall because this is harder for me to say than I'd like. He paused and looked away, gathering determination. Okay. Here goes. I still love you, Catherine. Oh my God, she whispered, tears falling freely now. She came up for a kiss, which he gladly gave her. Crushing her, he kissed her deeply. Rising up, cradling her in his arms, he laid her on the bed and began to undress her. She was sobbing, so beautiful and soft. He kissed the inside of her ankles and worked his way up, taking tender time. She was his. I will not disappoint you. Again, he murmured into her flesh. Her legs opened for him and he groaned at the sight of her moist secret lips. They were his now, too. He buried his face there and licked her slowly. She spread her legs wider and moaned so quietly. The decision and commitment changed him. It was an aphrodisiac that made him throb. He flicked her sensitive bean with the tip of his hot tongue. She held back her cries, but that made Dontae want to make her scream. He slipped a couple fingers in and increased and decreased his rhythm, taking his sweet time, working her slowly and listening to her lingering moans to guide him. He felt her tighten. She covered her mouth with her hands and cried out into them. He smirked and rose up, kneeling before her. Catherine's eyes went wide as they slipped down his chest and landed on his cock. He followed her gaze and saw that he looked massive. Guess I like you. She laughed into her hands and then opened her arms wide. He fell into them, pulled them over her head and maneuvered his hips to press his blunt tip against her drenched opening. Kissing her nose, he entered the wet heat of her. In one long, skilled thrust, he did circles, stretching her as she moaned. Slamming his mouth onto hers, he kissed her with all the passion he'd mistaken for hatred. When she began to whimper and come again, he went for her neck and bit down on it hard without breaking skin. She gasped as he held her there, the only part of her able to move her pulsing walls around him, her climax. Enduring and so good. He groaned and released her as his juices spilled inside, searching for the egg he knew was waiting there. Gotcha, he whispered into her ear. You really love me? She nodded, unable to voice the yes. He met her eyes and kissed her lips once before saying with a sneaky smirk, I hope so. Green eyes narrowed and the Catherine he knew returned in a flash. Oh really? Why is that, buddy? What did you just do? What's with that bite? She reached for her neck. Did you cut me? He chuckled, still hard inside her. No, I did not cut you. He shut her up with few heartstrokes. She wrapped her legs tightly around his hips, moaning and throwing back her head. When he stopped, she opened her eyes. Then what? What did you do? He leaned down to whisper in her ear. Lobsterer. You hungry? She slipped spent arms around his neck. So hungry. I thought I was going to eat alone. Never again. He sobered and held her gaze, remembering. Her eyes clouded as she saw him change. What is it? Don't ever be unfaithful to me again, Catherine. If you have a problem with me, tell me. Let me do what I can. I may not want to hear it at first, but I will listen. And I will make it my life's goal to make you happy. She started to cry again. I'm so sorry, Dontae. Sure, my strong woman doesn't cry so easily. She smiled through her tears. It was the wrong time for us. She gazed up at him, and he considered telling her that his wolf hadn't done then what he was doing now. Claiming her. He could have told her, the wolf who lives in me is my primal side exemplified. He knows things before I do. His instincts are pure, raw, unfettered by society's conditioning meant to numb our instincts and keep us slaves to fear and indecision. When he identifies the female he wants as his forever mate, there is no denying him. He hadn't done that with you when we were together before. I wasn't ready. Maybe. I don't know. He chose not to tell her. Some things might cause more harm than good, and he did not want her feeling that somehow before she was not good enough. The truth was, it just wasn't the right time, and they both paid for that with pain. What are you thinking? She asked him. He kissed her. You're not frightened now that you know what I am? She smiled, eyes soft as she cuddled closer. Do I look it? He gave a half chuckle. When I shifted, you did. She rolled her eyes on a light laugh. Well, give a girl a second to process. And you didn't warn me at all. You've always had a predilection for dramatic entrances. Oh really? She laughed outright. Yes, he smirked. So I didn't want to bore you. He kissed her again and the scent of her fertility lit him up inside like a fire exploding in his bloodstream. I have to make sure of something. What are you talking about? She gasped as he spread her thighs and filled her up, holding there and kissing her collarbone. This time they moved together like one, anticipating each other's needs and meeting them. As he spilled more seeds for the waiting egg, he crushed her in a kiss that said he promised to take care of this child and its mother. For the first time in his life, the idea of growing old with just one woman didn't sound repulsive. He couldn't wait. Chapter 76. Catherine popped Sweet Lobster coated in melted butter into her mouth in between asking many questions. Is that why I can't find a record of your family? He leaned forward so their conversation could not be overheard in the quaint, fisherman-owned cafe. It felt very strange to talk of these things, but also very freeing, a feeling he embraced with caution. I have a family, but they don't have social security numbers or driver's licenses. We lived, and they still do, outside of normal society in a more natural environment. What does that mean? She reached for her iced tea, eyes wide. He smiled and cracked off a piece, pulling out a tender chunk of meat. The woods. We lived in the woods my whole life until I moved to New York. Met you shortly after. He chewed as she shook her head in wonder. You really just lived in the woods? Yes. A very happy time and very simple. But as I began my 20s, I grew interested in more. It was my suggestion to try the lives lived by normal human males instead. My closest friends joined me. Didn't take them long to be persuaded. A fisherman straight out of a storybook, captain's hat and everything, walked over and dropped another lobster on their table, tan-faced grinning. Nice to have people who know how to eat. Thank you, Catherine laughed. It's really delicious. Did you catch these yourself? Every day of my life. He nodded to Dontae and left them to their meal. The wolf picked up the new lobster and cracked it for his mate with as much effort as he would use breaking a toothpick in half. Her eyelashes rose slowly. Dontae. He continued breaking off small sections. When she didn't say anything, he looked up. What? Did you beat up the motel guy? Dontae paused and blinked toward his plate. He picked up a wet cloth and wiped his fingers, considering how much he should reveal. It was not normal for him to be forthcoming. Not normal at all. What do you mean? Her eyes narrowed. Dontae. He paused and exhaled deeply. How do you know about that? You were gone. It was her turn to look away. Yes, well, maybe I went back for you. She nodded and took a sip from her glass. It occurred to him that he wasn't the only one having a hard time opening up. I went back, but you were gone. The cops were taking him away, but the door, it was in half, just like what you did with that lobster. I know it's not the same thing, but the way you just did that. I can't believe I didn't notice your strength before when we were together. He shook his head and wrapped thick fingers around his beer, keeping it on the table. I hid it. You couldn't have noticed because I never let you see it. Restraint, that's another reason you felt I wasn't being me around you. Because I wasn't. Oh. She sighed and took the outstretched lobster chunk. Well, that makes so much sense now. They said you saved that woman. I saw his face. He was really bloody. Good, Dontae muttered, lifting his beer to his lips. He took a big sip, his memory clear in his mind of the man who'd nearly succeeded. It was me. We do what we can to stop things like that from happening. My hearing, smell, strength and speed. Why not make use of them? Catherine sat there holding the uneaten lobster. She played with it, incredulous as she stared at him. You save people? We do, yes. You and the guys. The four of us. We fight crime. He gave a tongue-in-cheek wink. But she wasn't laughing. Dontae. She leaned forward. That's amazing. I can't believe it. Humble was never a feeling this wolf employed, so now that it was on him, he didn't understand it. Stammering, he shrugged and picked up the tail. Have some more lobster. She gave a soft chuckle and took the offered distraction. Thank you. He was very grateful when she changed the subject. So you're telling me that both Nathaniel and Dark are married now? Feigning annoyance, he shook his head. Yes, damn them. But don't leave out Eli. He's been taken down too. She threw the lobster on her plate in comical shock. Shut up. No way. Someone. Snagged Eli? You must be joking. I'm not joking. You should have seen the wedding. It was very, very Eli. Dunking a pink and white piece of meat in butter, he looked out at the bay. Beautiful place. And he felt right at home. I think I might need to move closer to the water. She looked out too, her smile softening. It's very soothing. A sudden twist in his stomach took Dontae by surprise. With the sun playing on the rippling water, he felt an unexplainable unease, as if something was terribly wrong. He dropped his hand to the table and gripped it, concentrating. Catherine glanced over and frowned. You okay? No. I just had a terrible feeling I'm needed. Let me see if they have a phone I can use. He started to call over the fisherman, but Catherine reached over and touched his hand. I have a phone. You said you didn't. I lied. She pulled it from her purse. Off his look, she demurred. No more lies. I promise. But I didn't want you to call for help just when you got in my car. It was selfish. I'm sorry. The compliment of the gesture pleased him, so he shrugged a shoulder and took the outstretched phone. Sneaky woman. Sneaky wolf, she countered with a wink. He laughed his usual one guffaw followed by the lingering chuckle. Dialing. Dark, he waited for the answer, his smile fading as the rings kept coming. When it went to voicemail, it vanished. He dialed again. Then his best friend answered with confusion. Hello. It's me, Dark. I'm using someone else's phone. He ignored the look Catherine threw him. Now was not the time to talk about who he was with. What's happened? Dark sighed relief. Where are you? Maine. Why? What's going on? Did you go back home? Dontae glanced to Catherine, who had her tea in her hand, eyebrows up. Not quite. I'm the other way, near the coast. Well, get back here. Someone's come. From the way he said that, Dontae knew it was a wolf. There would be no other need for privacy. One of ours. No. Dontae's muscles went rigid. Are you okay? Are you threatened? Just get back here. Right now we're fine. There are 3 of us, one of him. But he says he has questions. I'll drive back tonight. Dontae hung up his normal goodbye. Standing, he called over to the fisherman. Can we have the check? What's wrong? What's happened? Catherine rose up too, grabbing her purse and setting her glass down quickly. They walked to the counter together to pay the bill as he muttered under his breath. I'm not entirely sure. But it's not good. I have to go back. I'm coming with you. He handed the man his credit card, his mind already back in Manhattan. Who was there with them? What did the wolf want? How did he find them? Well, that wasn't a difficult question to answer. Wolves can smell other wolves just like they can smell fear, fertility, arousal. It was part of their primal makeup, designed for supreme survival. As he signed the slip, he told her, You're here for a vacation. Stay. Join me. When you're done. He heard her heart jump, then race. Thanking the fisherman, he took Catherine's hand and led her out of there. As soon as they stepped into the cloak of night, he reassured her. Nothing will have changed as far as you are concerned. You didn't tell him you were with me, she reminded him, unable to hide her hurt. I didn't tell him because, as you well know, you and I did not end on good terms. And up until a couple hours ago, I hated your fucking guts. Do you think they don't know that? Whose side will they be on? Who will they be protective of? At her silence, he added, They need me. Someone has shown up. Uninvited. Now is not the time to explain us. She jogged to keep up with him. Look, if we are in this, then I don't want to be left out. I'm coming with you. He didn't say anything for the 6th block walk back. As they entered the B&B, she said under her breath, Dontae. Mr. Willoughby waved with a smile. Dontae nodded curtly to the man, held the door open for her, and muttered, Catherine, I am not going to argue about this. The widower watched as they headed for the stairs. Still having fun? Catherine threw him a look and he lost the smile. Dontae liked the man, though, so he glanced over and nodded to him. Great time. Up the stairs they went. I'm not arguing, but I am driving you back. I have a car. She stopped outside his room. You rented one? Bought one. Did you see the Mustang out front? She dropped her jaw. The pretty blue one? Pretty? It's not pretty. Don't fluff up my ride, thank you very much. Laughing, Catherine followed him in. Fluffers are those people who keep the guy's heart for porno movies. He grabbed his suitcase and threw it on the bed. Pausing, he turned to her. Is that true? She nodded, eyes bright green with amusement. Uh-huh. He pursed his lips as he headed to the bathroom for his razor and shaving cream. Interesting. Well, don't fluffer up my car then. He smiled at her. Laugh returned and tossed the items into the suitcase, zipping it up as he added, You're staying here. Enjoy the days. Get over your ex. Do what you have to. The air changed in the room, so he looked over to see why. She appeared to be speechless. But that would be too good to be true. Oops. Old habits die hard. I want to hear what she has to say now. What's with the face? You're giving me space on purpose to get over Jonathan, she whispered. A fist punched his heart and he closed his eyes against jealous pain. Don't say his name again. Sorry. And yes, if you just broke it off, that was a long time that you were together. You came up here to do that, so stay and do it. I'm not worried. No, you'll come back to me this time. At least I fucking hope so. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him, tucking her head into his chest. I don't know what to say. I'm just being logical. Why doesn't everybody understand I'm driven by logic? He wrapped his arms around her and kissed the top of her flaxen head. I'll get a new phone as soon as I get back. You know where I live if you don't hear from me. Don't say that. He smiled and squeezed her tight. I just meant if I'm not able to get the phone before you return. I don't know what's awaiting me, but I do know that I'm very capable of handling it, whatever it is. You've no need to worry. Not about me. She craned her neck for a kiss, which he gladly gave her. Okay, I'll stay here. Good. I'll miss you. He laughed. I can't believe it, but I'll miss you too. She gave his backside a swat. He chuckled, then kissed her hard with finality. They released each other and he grabbed the suitcase and headed for the door, opening it for her to walk through. You must be upset. You didn't open it for me when we walked into your room. He frowned. Yeah, I guess I must be. They walked downstairs, which made Thomas Willoughby raise his white eyebrows. So you are leaving tonight after all? I thought for sure. Dontae threw the widower a half smile. This woman is the devil. But apparently I love the dark side. He turned to Catherine and leaned down for a last kiss. I love you. I love you too, she whispered, caressing his face. Her touch felt so good. Well, now that's a happy story. They both looked over as Mr. Willoughby beamed at them. Dontae slapped Catherine on the ass so hard she yelped. That hurt. You loved it, he chuckled. Goodbye, Thomas. Goodbye, Mr. Shepherd. Heading for his car, Dontae's smile vanished. What wolf would seek them out in the middle of Manhattan? Chapter 77. As Dontae walked up to Nathaniel's flat, the door opened and his friend stood in it, waiting, his face somber. Never leave town without your phone again. I won't do that again. Emerald eyes flickered with mild surprise at the quick submission. Dontae didn't notice. He was too busy heading to the living room where an unfamiliar smell disturbed him. The scent of man and animal strewn together in one dangerous package. Eli stood by the wall as he spun ice around his empty roc's glass eyes, flitting from the door to the other wolf. Dontae glanced to him as he walked in. They exchanged a nod as Darek stood and shoved his hands in the pockets of navy blue slacks, the suit jacket on the back of Nathaniel's leather chair. His face was rigid. Welcome back. Dontae nodded curtly to him, then walked to meet the rising stranger. They locked eyes, giving Dontae time to size the other beast up. He was big, too. Big. He was somewhere just over 30, with a thick beard and strikingly hard features, dark brown eyes that were almost black. Almost. It takes a brave wolf to stand tall in a pack not his own. I'm not afraid. I see that. Your name? Xavier Durant. He waited. Dontae. My last name is of no consequence to you. Your drink is empty. Nathaniel. Dontae didn't look back. His eyes were entangled with this Xavier character. He didn't like that the bastard hadn't blinked. Why are you here? New York's an interesting city, the wolf smirked. Dontae did not return even a hint of amusement. I mean, why are you here? In my friend's home. You're messing with family. Easy now, Xavier said, his hands slipping into the loose pockets of dark blue jeans. The thin white t-shirt pulled across his pectoral muscles and Dontae caught sight of large tattoo under the fabric. He didn't care what it was of. Here. Nathaniel handed them both a glass. Dontae hadn't even heard it being poured. He took it and was about to drink when Xavier offered his out to tap in. The obligatory toast. Dontae growled and drank from the glass without obliging. The beast. Xavier smiled outright and glanced around the somber faces. Well, I can see why you waited. This is your alpha. None of us are alpha here, Dontae snarled. The wolf's brows rose in mild surprise. No? I would disagree. Durant crossed his lanky arms. We are equals. Eli spoke up. Tell us why you're here, Xavier. Enough. With characteristic smoothness, Nathaniel agreed. Stop trying to irritate us. He stood with his legs hip-width apart behind Dontae and to the right. Xavier took an appreciative sip. Good scotch. He smiled and glanced around the room. But I already said that before, didn't I? Well, let me get to the point. My boys and I live in Chicago. We got wind of what you're doing here. So I came to check you out. That's as much as we've gotten out of him, Eli informed Dontae. I see. Are you very interested in architecture? Dontae asked deadpan. Xavier chuckled and took another sip, stepping back for some room. Excuse me. Feels a little tight. He walked to the wall behind him and leaned against it, swinging one large booted foot too casually over the other. I couldn't give a shit about your buildings. I'm talking about your heroics. The pack registered the announcement with little reaction, not wanting to give the wolf anything to feed off of. He was clearly enjoying this a little too much. Heroics? Well, building green isn't easy, that's for sure, Eli said with a smile in his voice. It made Dontae relax. Eli's best talent. Durant picked up on it too and chuckled lightly. I'll say, talking old fashioned humans into saving the environment. It can be such a bitch. Dontae's austere veneer broke and he smiled. Xavier's eyes flickered as he took another sip of scotch. He stared at the blonde wolf before him, noticing the change and not happy with it. Dontae. Angry was one thing, smiling another. It was like you didn't know what he was going to do. And here I thought you were a bunch of pricks with poles up your asses forgetting to have a little fun. Glad to see you're laughing. He stuck a finger in his glass and moved ice around with it. I'm talking about the saving people, the superhero stuff. What's the deal with that? What are you talking about? Nathaniel asked. That's how it's going to be. Xavier smirked toward him. Huh, killer. In a flash Nathaniel shifted, his wolf lunging at Xavier. Dontae had known Nathaniel since he was born and knew the sound of his transformation well, so he grabbed him in time. Xavier's eyes glowed hot as he braced himself against the wall, feet spread. Dontae grabbed the dark brown fur and held fast. Durant was there in a flash to help. Eli raced forward and punched Xavier in the face, cracking his neck back with a horrible noise. What the fuck do you know? Eli demanded as Xavier adjusted his jaw, hand massaging his beard, eyes now the color of his drink. I have a friend on the police force. He told me, he growled. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm just tired of playing games. I've been waiting for hours to get some answers. Call off your dog. Nathaniel snarled and tried to free himself to get at the bastard, but two friends had him now and he wasn't going anywhere. His fangs dripped with need for blood. Control. 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 Durant whispered into his friend's ear. Control. 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 Eli stood between them and Xavier, his back wide and flexed, hands fisted and ready for use. Dontae was very interested in this business about the police. How much do they know? He asked, turning the heads of his friends. We need information. He's got it. Let's take this a step back. Nathaniel? You hear me? The wolf panted and after a few suspenseful moments shifted back. Nathaniel in his human form shook off his packmates. I'll go get dressed. Wait for me. Can't you hear us through the walls, friend? I'm not your friend, Nathaniel snarled. Go, Dontae said firmly. Had it been him who was purposefully provoked in that way with that ammo, he'd have done exactly the same. They waited for Nathaniel to return and when he did, he was in a suit. He walked right over the shards of his previous outfit and crossed his arms, waiting. Well, Xavier's eyes lost their supernatural glow. I like you guys. And I'm not just saying that. Okay, I have to admit I've been a bit dickish. Is that a word? Feels like a word. But you've gotta understand I don't know you. It was 3 to me, and then you called this one. He motioned to Dontae. 4 to 1? I'm big. But 4 wolves to 1? Not good odds. You want to find out. His eyebrows rose as he scanned the unamused faces. He smiled again. Here's the deal. I used to be a cop. I have friends on the force in quite a few major cities because over the years people move, get transferred. Chicago's weather ain't the best in wintertime, but you know all about that living on the East Coast. 1 year ago tomorrow I stopped being a cop. He looked up like he was counting the months. Yeah. Wow. Get on with it, Eli growled. Xavier held up his drink. I think you need another one of these. Last straw. At the top of his lungs, Dontae exploded. What the fuck do you want? Xavier blinked a few times, disarmed. He licked his lips. He glanced to the floor, to the leather couch Nathaniel and Eli bought together back when they were roommates, then back to Dontae. I want to help people too. Dontae exchanged glances with the others. You want to help people? Nathaniel muttered with suspicion. But you're an asshole. Dark sputtered, too shocked to be polite. Eli snorted and directed his attention back to Sergeant Chicago. Dontae broke the ensuing silence. You're going to have to give me a second drink. Hang on. He downed his scotch and embraced the burn it sent down his tense throat. The room was quiet until he said, Okay, go ahead. Eli stretched his shoulders before crossing beefy arms. You came here because you want to help people like we're doing. That's why you're here. Xavier looked a little sheepish, which on a wolf his size was oddly charming. Had there been a woman present, she would have said, Oh, but there wasn't one. I couldn't do what you're doing on the force. I had to live by the books, and you can't do that and get anything done. Too many rules. Couldn't get around them. You send a bad guy to jail and he's out in a couple days because of the system. But you guys, my friends told me all about the criminals who are coming and confessing shit that guys like that would never own up to. Some of them were saying things about wolves. Do the police believe them? Dark demanded. Xavier shook his head, an incredulous subdued smile playing on his lips. That's the thing. They don't. Of course they don't. It's the perfect mask. And it's not a mask at all. Eli sucked on his teeth and turned to the others. This is very interesting. I'll say, Dontae mumbled. Let's sit down. Nathaniel walked back to the bar. I'll fill us all up. Tell us everything you know, Dark said. Step back so Xavier could get to the couch. The bearded wolf walked over, but his body held uncertainty. He was moving carefully, and he should. It was this behavior that made Dontae relax because it meant Xavier wasn't insane. The attitude earlier had suggested the opposite, but his sarcasm and jabs could have been a tactic for self-defense. It was too early to tell for sure. Placing his now empty glass on the coffee table, Xavier sat down on the edge of the leather cushion. With forearms on his thighs, he launched in. The only time they thought there really was a wolf was when that guy got killed downtown, and the scientific evidence came back wolf, as you know. So they were looking for an escaped zoo animal, but the zoo claimed they got the beast back and put him down. Media problem solved. He paused as the room took in that information. I don't know if they actually killed a wolf. And they call us animals. We eat animals, if I may remind you, Dark. Dontae sighed. I'm just saying. It's different when it's a wolf. I get it. It's like killing family, Xavier said, meeting Dark's eyes. He took the glass. Nathaniel walked over to him. Thanks. Back home things are out of control. I want to do something about it. But it's your hometown, and you were a cop there. Won't they recognize you? Nathaniel asked, passing out drinks to the others who were all sitting in chairs like an audience, the couch and its occupant, the stage and its player. Xavier shook his head and took a sip. Damn, that is good. Yes and no. The bad guys won't, because I worked the suburbs mostly, like Norwich and Downers Grove. With the cops I was largely ignored. They hated my beard, my size, and my attitude. Most of them didn't want to work hard like I did. They wanted the government benefits. Dontae took a sip. This is interesting. You'll know how their system works. How to evade it. We had to learn that on our own. Wasn't easy, Dark muttered, walking slowly back and forth with his glass in his hand. Nathaniel thought about this and asked, why come here? Why not just go ahead and do this? Xavier made a surprised sound as if they should understand that already. I had to see if you were really what I thought you were. They don't know you're here. But all the cases since he died have been too interesting to me. I had to see if it was possible that werewolves had found a way to use their abilities to serve society. We've got enough evil on the planet. Why not open the drain and flush the fuckheads down it? You mentioned others, Eli reminded him. You have a pack? Xavier nodded and stuck his finger in the glass again, moving the ice around. There are 3 of us. Me, Kurrick, and Drake. And yes, we all want to do this what you're doing. He trailed off, glancing to his drink. Eli seemed to get it. It gives you something to do with all this. He motioned to his body, to the way it naturally ran hot, to the itch that pulled at their skin and made them all want to run as fast as they could. Chase things. Hunt. Dontae nodded to himself, and he noticed all the others were doing the same. Xavier said, exactly. Where are you staying? Nathaniel's tone was much changed from before. Hotel. You'll stay with Dontae. Dontae turned to glare at him. He'll what? You're the only one who isn't married. I'm sorry, but no man is going to let this guy stay in the same house with his wife. Xavier smirked, but the others weren't smiling. Yeah, well, he can stay at the hotel. I'm back with Catherine. Ignoring the dropped jaws and wide eyes of his packmates, he said firmly, I'm going to send for her to come back now that I know everything's fine. So no, Xavier Durant cannot fucking stay with me. Wait a minute. Eli bellowed, hitting his thigh. You're what? You're back. With whom? You're what? Are you serious? Nathaniel asked, dumbstruck. Or are you fucking with us? Dark had Dontae stare hostage and wasn't letting go until he had answers. Can we talk about this another time? No. No. No fucking way. Dontae looked over to Xavier, who shrugged. I have no idea what's going on. But apparently this Catherine person is bad news. Dontae started laughing. He couldn't stop. Somehow, at this moment it got his funny bone going and he really lost it. Tears even came as his friends gaped at him. Eli was the first to smile, but no one laughed. They just couldn't. You should see your faces. Oh man, Dontae chuckled, finally tapering off. Okay, long story short. I drove for the first time. Great stuff, by the way. Broke the car. Lots of rain. Catherine rescued me. She hit me. I fucked her. She left me there while I stopped a rape. Then I went after her. But she'd gone back for me. So that meant that where I looked for her, she wasn't there yet because she was looking for me. We ended up staying at the same B&B. Very odd. I smelled her before I saw her. We fought. I showed her my wolf. We fucked. Now as it turns out, she's it. I'm going to marry the fucking cunt. Happy. Dontae looked around at the speechless faces. Oh, and she got engaged to the guy she left me for. It wasn't just a fling. Turns out I was always hiding a secret from her and she didn't feel I loved her. So she left. He raised his eyebrows around the room like, anyone wonder how that could happen? Forced to keep their secrets their entire lives. All 4 heads nodded. Understanding and recognition. Dark leaned back on the chair and said, wow. I mean, wow. Right. Eli mumbled. How am I going to change the way I think about her? Nathaniel said, we'll find a way. But he wasn't sure how. This. You see this? Xavier said, motioning around the wolves. This is why I steer clear of women. They mess with your lives. All right, I'm getting out of here. Now that I know my suspicions were right, I want to get started. Everyone rose up, save for the already standing Nathaniel, who was heading for the door to walk out his guest. He raked a hand through his dark brown hair, still processing Catherine's return to their lives, muttering, you just never know what's going to happen, do you? Dontae nodded. Now that everything was handled with the surprise visitor, he was uncomfortably aware that Catherine wasn't even in the same city as he was. When do the phone stores open up? Phone stores, Eli chuckled. What provider do you have, D? Call it that. Xavier interrupted. 10 o'clock where I come from. Dropped my phone in the toilet the other day. Had to get a new one. Fucking sucked. He turned around at the front door to say goodbye. Well, it's been interesting. Let me give you my number in case you ever come to Chi Town. You really call it that? Dark asked. Never. Good catch, Xavier smiled. You like to fuck with people, Eli smirked. Yep. He held out a hand and Eli pulled out his phone from his pocket and handed it to him. After the digits were entered, they all shook hands and stood by the closed, locked front door to listen as the wolf outside left down the stairs just to make sure he really was leaving. The stairs? Really? Fucking show off, Eli mumbled, heading back to the living room. Where are the girls? Dontae asked. Women, Nathaniel corrected. How many times I have to tell you they're not girls? They're women. Dark laughed. They're at my place. They stayed up for hours just like the old days where none of them were married, when they used to meet here every weekend night they didn't get lucky, or when the luck wasn't a sleepover, which was both more common and desired. His friends grilled him for more details. For once in his life he didn't mind opening up and giving a little more than usual. When they'd exhausted that subject, and a whole bottle of Oban, they hashed out Xavier's story, what the cops knew, and how they'd have to be more diligent and careful about how they battled the bad guys. Won't do anyone any good if we get caught and have to stop, Dark said, the gravity of that possibility weighing on all of them. Eli added, and we have women who depend on us now, holding up his glass like a toast before taking a healthy gulp. Dontae lifted his glass and casually said, and a child on the way. Eli spit his drink all over the coffee table. What? The other two echoed him immediately, aghast. Dontae chuckled. Fertile as the day is long, my Catherine. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Eli wiped his face with the back of his hand. Michelle's no dummy. She knows I can smell her arousal, so she asked if I knew when she was ready to go, and I couldn't lie to her. She wants to wait. Dark rose up off the chair. He'd been gaping at Dontae, trying to figure something out. Does she know you did that? Dontae started laughing. Nope. Dark slumped back down, mouth dropped. Holy shit. Eli guffawed so loudly their ears hurt. You got her back? Dontae shook his head. No. I've just got her. That silenced Eli right up. His friend stared at him. Stop looking at me like a soulless monster. I'm more romantic than you think. Remember Talia? Why, he wouldn't show her. Dark reminded the others. Oh yeah. Oh right. I forgot. Dontae remembered that moment with them, then explained. Catherine always wanted kids. Remember? I told you that, and that I stayed firm on the stance. That I didn't. Well, now I do. And she loves me. She does. I saw it. When I tell her, she's going to be the happiest she's probably ever been. He felt a little tug at his chest as he added, Michelle's not ready, Nathaniel, but I know Catherine is. I would never have done it otherwise. Dark whistled. I never thought I'd see this day. And you showed her your wolf. Dontae nodded. Yeah, have to say it was hot. They all agreed with him and felt the same about their experiences on that subject. The night didn't come to an end until dawn forced them to return to the reality of their daily lives. As great as those were, Guy's time was a precious thing not one of the four was happy to give up. Chapter 78. Well, hello there. Looks like you got your phone back. She practically purred. The sound of her voice made him wish he hadn't told her to stay in Maine. Cracking eggs into the oil-covered pan, he corrected. Not back. It was shattered. I've got a new one now. Even picked a new colored case. What did you get? And are you frying eggs? That crackling sound. I am. And black. She laughed. Why do I have a feeling the old one was black? He reached over to the other active frying pan to flip bacon over. It was almost done and the aroma filled the air. Enjoying the mouth-watering smell. He explained, Eli gave me a hard time about everything being black, so I had a silver one. Back to what I love. Speaking of which, get your sweet ass back home. And by home I mean my home. She giggled, not a normal thing for Catherine. I was hoping you'd say that. The sound felt giddy to him and very feminine. His wolf loved it. Well, then why aren't you already here? She laughed outright. I'm on my way. Fly home. He poked the eggs around with a wooden spoon and salted them. Leave the car. My parents would love that. It's theirs. I'll drive. But I'll leave now. Good. Enough for you. It'll have to do. Speaking of which, I want to meet them. There was a silent pause on the other end of the line. But he'd heard her heart jump. He wouldn't tell her that. Best not to give away all his secrets. We might want to wait for that, she said quietly. With his fingers he picked 6 slices of bacon from the sizzling hot pan and tossed them onto a black plate. Why is that? Probably best to take it slow, she explained. The vagueness didn't make him happy. Speak. Dontae. Say it. He flicked off the gas of both burners and flipped the eggs from the pan to the plate, landing them perfectly beside their counterpart. You're not talking. Just say it already. They loved my ex, okay? Like really loved him. They don't know I've ended it. So if I introduce you they'll think. She trailed off. He stared at the wall and at the past. They'll think you cheated on him. Yeah. I see. He exhaled and drummed his fingers on the counter, trying to think of the right thing to do. He wanted to say fuck them and your ex, but that was pure ego, and it wouldn't help anyone. His desire to make her happy fought with his desire to be pissed right the fuck off. He exhaled again. Dontae. No. It's fine. It can wait. But you need to. I know. I will tell them we broke up as soon as I get back. I'm leaving now. Then while I really want to see you, I'm going to go home, sleep in my bed, and see them first thing in the morning. I want to clear this up before we begin. I know we already began. I just don't want to feel like I did the last time. Can you understand that? He made a noise. Part of me hates it. Part of me thinks you've changed. For the better. So do what you need to do. Thank you. Do you want me to bring you back some lobster? I can go get you some on my way out. The only sweet pink meat I want is between your legs. Come back to me. Her voice lost its nervousness. Since you put it that way, she chuckled. Then she hung up and he stared at the phone. That's how I end phone calls, he mumbled, shaking his head as he grabbed his plate and headed for the balcony. It was an overcast, chilly day, but the view of skyscrapers and bustling human activity was worth it. They'd left the forest years ago, and not one day had passed where he'd regretted it. Chapter 79. What do you mean? Her mother said, pale green eyes devoid of comprehension. Did you have a fight on your vacation? That's normal. Traveling together is difficult. It doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sitting on their cream-colored Hermes couch, Catherine fiddled with the car keys as she stared at her shoeless feet. In her parents' house no one wore shoes. New York was too dirty. You left them by the door so as not to track prints over the impossible-to-keep clean white carpet. Her mother sat across from her, on another Hermes couch, this one light gray, drinking her usual morning beverage. Sauvignon Blanc with ice, no matter how expensive the bottle or refined the grape. Henry Zenith was listening in from the kitchen, about to make coffee in a French press. What happened? He called out before he hit the grind button, transforming the beans into shiny crumbs. She'd prepared this speech all the way back to New York, but now that she was here she felt very self-defensive. That always equaled for her, wall up. Emotions detached. Face blank. Head held high. Back straight. Feet ready to run. But today she was slumped and staring at her manicured pink toenails. No. He wasn't with me. I broke things off before I went. Just wasn't the right match. I don't love Jonathan the way I love Dontae, she wanted to say. The way I should. Her mother craned her neck back, her chin doubling. So what? He would have made you a very good husband. And you're getting older. I'm 32. Right. Catherine rolled her eyes, detachment quickly waning. What are you saying? Mother. I'm drying up? Because if that's what you're saying, you can just. Coffee's here. Her father hurried in with a forced smile. She's got a lot of years ahead, Margot, and who knows? Maybe Kate doesn't want kids. Her stomach turned over. As helpful as he was trying to be, it wasn't working. She wanted children more than anything, and she'd just gone back to a man who had always warned her kids were not in his future. Their future. Ever. He had no use for them. He used to say all kinds of things that get in the way of your life. How can you travel with kids around? You have to wait until you retire to do anything. Name one person who's happy with children. Okay, 2. But I bet you can't name 3. It was depressing to know that while choosing him, she was also choosing to shut off that side of herself. For good. I must really love him. Well, it doesn't matter right now because Jonathan and I are done. He's at Mark's. He called me back last night and told me movers would be coming next weekend. That was the earliest he could book somebody. So, and not that you care, but for the next however many days that is, I have to live among all of our stuff and feel the loss of that. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pass on the coffee and go somewhere where I don't feel shittier. She rose up. Sit, her mother commanded with her glass as an instrument. Kate, sit. Sucking on her teeth like an angry child, Catherine slowly did as she was told. All right, I'm sitting. What? Is there someone else? Mrs. Zenith's eyebrows went up like she knew the answer, which was irritating to say the least. Catherine glanced to her father and found him waiting for the answer in pretty much the same way. God, you guys. Just because you've had affairs doesn't mean everyone has. They kept staring, unmoved by her attempt to distract them with a proverbial mirror of their own inadequacies. Well, at least you don't deny it, she grumbled. Give me that coffee. Her father pushed it toward her, amusement in his eyes. Stop looking at me like that, Dad. I didn't cheat on John, but there is someone else. Already? Margot asked. Yes, already. But it's not what you think. I didn't meet someone before John. And I broke up. It's someone I used to date. She paused and begged for inner courage. Remember Dontae? Her mother, always the one to speak first, dryly replied. The man you used to live with, whom we never met. How could we forget? Muttered her father with distaste. So you went on vacation with this Dontae character? Catherine sighed. No, that's not what happened. She gave them the short version, leaving out the part about her true love not being totally human. They reacted mildly to all the major coincidences she and Dontae experienced, with only slightly rising eyebrows, sometimes only one. And so we're going to give it another shot, she finished, sitting on the edge of her seat, expecting little if any support. Her mother finished what was left of her wine, which wasn't much. Her father drank down his coffee. Both of them stared at the antique coffee table that had been in the same spot since 1878. Setting down her wine, her mother sighed. Well, that's some story. The sigh may have been because the glass was empty. I have to admit, I would have done one thing differently. Curious, her father looked over. Oh, what's that? Catherine, however, was not interested. Of course she's going to critique how I handled myself. Nothing is ever as good as she would have done it. I would have made damn sure John didn't get a hold of my phone. Poor man. He doesn't need to know about this Dontae person. She glanced around. What? I'm just saying, if I hadn't known about your father's dalliances, I would have been a happier woman, I can tell you that. Oh, Henry Zenith curtly replied. And what of yours, Margot? Mine were a reaction to yours, you idiot. She shot him a short glance, then looked at her empty glass like it was the saddest thing she'd ever seen. Her father got up soundlessly, grabbed it and went to get a refill. As soon as he was out of earshot, her mother mumbled for only Catherine to hear. He knows. I'm right. It's not a matter of right and wrong, Mother. It's always a matter of right and wrong. She pushed some hairsprayed white hair around, but it didn't really move. Even at 8:30 in the morning she was perfectly coiffed. Who is this Dontae person? What's his last name? Does he have family in the city? No. He doesn't. Catherine smiled at the secret she now shared with him. But he comes from a strong line. His name? Shepherd. Her mother blinked to the ceiling as though the name sparked a memory. Wait. Where do I know that name from? Dontae Shepherd, you say? She lit up with recognition. Of DDN Incorporated? That Dontae Shepherd? Very surprised, Catherine paused. Yes. How do you know them? Dear? Henry. Are you listening? Of course I am. What was it we were just reading about, that condominium in Chelsea using bamboo for insulation? Henry walked back in, nodding as he handed the fresh glass to his wife. Yes. That was them. Well, that's who Catherine's leaving John for. God, I wish you wouldn't say it like that. He's one of those architects there. Reclaiming his place on the couch, Henry made a sound. Really? Well, they're doing interesting things. Popped up a few times over the years in design magazines, haven't they? Keeping a fairly low profile themselves, it seems. But the companies who commission them sure are getting boosts in their stocks by touting what they've done. All great stuff for the environment. Lots of recycled materials. Yada yada. Great stuff. He picked up his coffee and noticed it empty, then glanced to the kitchen to decide if he felt like making Another trip and thought better of it. Taken aback but pleased, Catherine asked, "How'd you remember his name?" "Are you kidding?" Her mother chuckled. "Dontae Shepherd. What a name. Is he as handsome a man as it implies?" "He's something else," Catherine smiled, loving the inside joke. "I can't wait for you guys to meet him." "Bring him over for dinner on Sunday," Henry suggested. The idea of a meeting like this taking place so soon was devastating to think about, so Catherine said she'd get back to them after they looked at their calendars. This didn't sound at all odd to the Zeniths because everything in their busy social lives was based on maintaining a packed schedule. She would be able to skirt the issue for an indefinite amount of time. When she got to Dontae's later that evening, she'd completed most of the things she'd hoped to do that day. She'd separated her things from Jonathan, for the most part, so that when the movers came the job would be simple and less painful. Even though she didn't love him like she should to become his wife, the years they spent together were real. Their friendship, tangible and true. All breakups are like a death. You go from seeing someone all the time to acting as if you don't know they're still on the same planet as you. Sometimes in the very same town just down the street. So she took the time, for a valuable sense of closure, to pack a little. Tears were shed. Things thrown away. Walls stared at. Finally she showered, dressed herself in her favorite red dress, and put Visine in her eyes to hide the evidence. Dontae opened the door as she walked up. She paused in surprise and then smiled, running into his arms. "I missed you," she whispered into his chest, breathing in his masculine scent. "For years I've missed you." He kissed the top of her head, then pulled up her chin to kiss her properly. She expected him to say something sweet, but he murmured against her lips, "I wish I could say the same, but I hated your guts so." She laughed, but he crushed her lips to his and tightened his embrace so much she could barely breathe. "Easy there, Hulk." It was his turn to laugh, and he led her into the flat by the hand, kicking the door casually closed. "You remember my place?" She scanned the black hallway, nodding. "That's a new sculpture. A Tremblay." He smirked. "Still know your art, I see." "Of course. And she's amazing." "I'm starving. What are you cooking for me?" "Well, as I mentioned on the phone," he said, as he led her into the kitchen. "Meat and potatoes." She glanced around and was not that surprised to discover everything relatively unchanged. Dontae was a minimalist. He didn't believe in clutter, only style and luxury. But if you're looking for more specific details, filet mignon and smashed potatoes. Smashed. He nodded, opening up the oven to show her. Red potatoes roasted until they're very soft, then broiled for a crispy outside, then you smash them with a wooden spoon until they're half squashed, basically. Delicious. Smells so good. She closed her eyes and breathed in the delicious aroma. "I'm starving. So red wine then." As he closed the oven door he paused, then shut it. "I thought we'd not drink tonight." "Are you kidding? After the morning I had with my parents." She left out what she'd been doing all day. "I need a glass of wine. Or 7. He walked to the sink and turned on the faucet. His white button-up shirt was rolled at the sleeves, and as he washed his hands it pulled at the broad expanse of his shoulders. She admired his body, the way his clothes hung on him. His feet were bare, which was adorable. It took her a moment to realize he wasn't talking. She leaned a hip against the kitchen island and kicked off her high heels. "Everything okay?" He turned off the water and stared straight ahead. There was nothing to look at, so a slip of anxiety snuck into her system. She picked up a shiny red apple from the bowl next to her and played with the stem, her mouth going dry. Felt like 10 years passed before he finally turned around. She glanced up and slowly set down the fruit, waiting. "You can't have wine, Catherine." "Why?" She blinked a few times. "If you're thinking about my stories about my mom, you don't have to worry. I'm not an alcoholic, too." He shook his head, waving his hand like that wasn't it. "No, I mean you can't." "Why can't I?" she stammered. "I mean, are you afraid we'll fight or something? Because I don't want to fight." "We're not going to fight," he assured her with unwavering patience. She bounced her hip against the island, exasperated. "Well then, I don't know why you're saying that I can't. That I personally can't have wine. I mean, the only reason I'd not be able to drink wine was if I was." She trailed off, staring at the floor. Her eyelashes fluttered upward. "Pregnant." He walked to her. "I'm pregnant." He took both her hands and held them. I'm fairly certain you are. A test. Wouldn't hurt. But I've smelled pregnancy enough times to know. Oh my God. Is it? No, he exclaimed. It's mine. Mine. Don't worry. I knew you were fertile. When we coupled. A series of emotions raced across her expressions. Oh my God. I'm going to have a baby. We are. But why do you look happy? You hate kids. He shocked the hell out of her by busting up laughing. Then he shook his head, on a lingering grin as she gaped at him. No, I don't. But I couldn't have kids with you when you didn't know I was a wolf. Shock slammed into her chest. Wait. I'm going to have a baby werewolf. How? Am I going to explain that to the doctor? His smile disappeared and he pulled her into his arms. Isn't that going to hurt? Am I going to die? He covered her lips with a patient index finger. Listen. He lifted her up onto the island and stood in between her legs, his hands on her hips, hers on his chest. I like this dress, by the way, especially with it up around your hips like this. But no, the baby will be human. It may not even change. Ever. But if he or she does, it will be at puberty. We'll have to go away for that. And for a couple years. Until we train our child to control the shift and how to use their abilities. Then we can come back. That's a long way away. She stared off, thinking of his friends. They looked like normal people. Better than normal, actually. All of them had a power to them, not a weakness. And now she knew the reason. My child will be like you, she whispered, realizing. He or she will be special. She met his gaze. Our child will be like you. And you, Catherine. I hope he or she, he smiled, gets the benefit of your beautiful green eye color. She couldn't help but kiss him at the unexpected compliment. That's the first time you've said you like my eyes. Well, I don't want to do that with you. Not anymore. We're going to have a baby, she whispered, tears threatening to fall. I'm trying not to cry. He smirked and touched her belly. This time I'd understand if you were a wuss. She grabbed his face and kissed him again, but this time it grew more passionate, that is, until he pulled away with a start. Shit. The steak. It was fine. And to drink there was